Hello and welcome to Stephen University. This week we are in hiatus mode still. Sadly, there has been no drop of the 2 episodes we are waiting for Cartoon Network to air.
You can't use that tone this early in hiatus mode. That was a tone like associated with like the 100th hiatus episode. You gotta strap in, man. Even I know that. You can't 2 episodes in be we're still in hiatus mode, guys.
You know what it is? It's the season structure that's throwing me, because I know there's just 2 left of the season. So in my head, I was prepared for a big wait after the next episode. It'll be 2 airing, obviously Legs from Here to Homeworld and the one after that. But like, bloody hell. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I just thought we'd have those pretty quickly. Those 2 on television. One which we've already seen through the Comic-Con thing, and then the new one, and then the season would end. And then I'm not naming it on purpose this time, because last week there were a few people that didn't listen due to spoilers. They don't want the episode titles. But like, there's at least one left to air of the season. So my head is going like, you know, those are shortly coming. Those are due. And then expect to wait. But that's not what's going to happen, is it? It's going to be a massive wait, and then they're going to air the end of the previous season, and then go straight into the new season. It's exactly what's going to happen. I can see it a mile away. Seasons mean nothing in Steven Universe, and it's frustrating as fuck.
That's very illogical, though. I'm hopeful. I mean, my view to hiatus is it will last as long as it lasts. So I'm trying not to, get too theoretical on that. But I would be hopeful that we'll get the last episode of season 5. And then the gap, because that's, logical.
But that's what I'm saying.
You're right.
That's why I'm going sort of, we still don't have it, because like...
Oh, no, but despite me thinking that, Dan, that can't be... that's got to be in the back of my mind. But in the front of my mind has got to be, this could go and go.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. We got tons of stuff planned. I think we wanted to do a couple of sort of standardy episodes first, and then, but next week maybe, if there's no like Steven Universe news or something we can discuss, or another topic like what we're going to do today, then maybe we do our first revisit next time.
Yep. Yeah,
I think that'd be fun. I'm excited to do something like that. But this week it's going to be an interesting one, because I didn't have anything for us to talk about, Chris, and then.
First of all, can we share the discussion of a potential episode? Because your reaction just made me laugh so much. I said to Dan, I'm like, maybe we can rank the gems this week. I thought that'd be quite cool. Like, make a list, see, compare orders. And Dan just kind of ignores it and is just like, maybe we could rank the episodes. And I was like, well, I don't really feel comfortable with that yet. I'd have to like revisit some episodes, really look and remember what episode is what. Like, I would love to do that at some point, but that's going to take a bit of work. And he's like, yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. And I'm like, what's your reasoning for not ranking the gems? And what did you say again? I can't remember how you phrased it.
So I had to pull it up. I don't have it in front of me, but let me just quickly see if I can find it.
It was amazing, though. I think my response was nerd, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I was trying to find that. There you go. So you say we could rank the crystal gems, and I'm like, or episodes. So I'm already ignoring it. And you're like, I wouldn't mind rewatching some episodes before we do that. I don't feel like I know them well enough at the moment. I'm like, that's fair. We need to think on it. And you're like, what you're not liking about ranking the gems? And I respond, and I do mean this sincerely, I can't quite get on board with ranking the gems, because the whole thing is that Homeworld does that. Like, the whole point of the show is that everyone is ranked and categorized, and I don't feel comfortable ranking the characters that way. And Chris's response was literally just, nerd.
So sad.
Yeah.
Oh, Dan. So that's why we're not ranking the crystal gems.
But also, I don't know what we get out of that. Like, okay, great. Like, Garnet kicks the most ass. Bye, everyone.
I think it'd be surprising. Like, we'd have different lists. You'd be like, oh, I didn't expect them to be so low. Because I love all of them so much that, like, whoever's in last is going to be a real surprise.
Right.
Like, I'd probably put Amethyst or Peridot in last. And I love both of those.
What?
Exactly.
You're a lunatic.
Well, who you put in last then?
You're a lunatic.
This is what I'm saying. It's an interesting subject.
Yeah, you're a crazy person.
But we can't do it, guys, because we don't want to treat the gems the same way that Homeworld treats the gems.
Precisely.
Yeah. So instead, we're talking about censorship.
They're sentient beings. They exist. They don't. It's just rude, Chris. It's just rude.
Fundamentally, they're pixels. I'm just saying, like in reality. But
your pixels.
So instead, we're gonna chat censorship. So was there a specific news article or something you had?
Well, yeah. So basically, the reason we're gonna chat censorship is because there's something weird happened this week. So what I was getting to before you interrupted me with that tangent, Chris. God, we've been such a focused show. I'm appalled at your decision.
I thought it was worth people knowing, because I'm very intrigued whether everyone's going to be like, yeah, no, Dan, that makes complete sense. Why would you want to treat the gems like that? Or whether people are going to be like, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah.
Rank the gems.
So we, I didn't have much for us to talk about, and then A Single Pale Rose aired in the UK. And A Single Pale Rose is obviously quite an important episode to the show. We know that, and the reveal was mostly kept intact in the UK, but for some weird reason
for goodness sake,
they cut out any reference to Pink eating the shards so that they're left on the ground when she's poofed. And I mean all I can think is choking. They're worried kids are gonna mimic it, but
yeah, swallowing glass and stuff.
That's a fucking stretch, isn't it? I like. Was there a spurt in America of children eating glass after that episode aired? I feel probably not. That seems weird, and it really. I've seen the scene now, edited. It really fucks with the flow of the scene. And also, like, it makes the leftover shards be a bit like, well, what are they? Because like the thing makes a lot less sense if you don't know that they're fake shards. Like, it's all very weird. I'm not gonna lie.
That is weird. And yeah, that's very weird. Why didn't the? I suppose they don't know what happened to the shards. But anyway, I'm just thinking, why didn't the other diamonds try and get the shards? But they weren't there. I suppose they had it all second-hand account, didn't they? But anyway.
And the thing is, they might have done something with the shards. We just don't know. Like for all we know, those shards are in a bloody case somewhere on display. Like, I don't.
But you think they'd have investigated them to see whether they were fake or not, or tried to heal them or something. So,
yeah,
but anyway, we digress. I think the weird thing about that is, my question would be, because actually I understand that as a logic. And as a reason for censorship, way more than some of the kind of Pearl Rose stuff that's been censored, and the Ruby Sapphire stuff that's been censored. I get that way more. You present the argument of, we don't want to encourage children to swallow sharp things. That I actually, whilst I don't necessarily agree with, I think children are more intelligent than that. I can at least understand the logic. The question I would have is, are Cartoon Network still airing things like Roadrunner and like all these other stuff which contain people getting whacked on the head and that kind of thing? I mean, I was very much part of the should Power Rangers be banned generation, and none of us grew up to be 25, 28-year-olds attempting to karate chop each other in the street.
I don't know. I don't know about you, but I mean, I run around doing martial arts on just about anyone I can find, so,
Dan, you don't. You do what the Power Rangers do. You just jump about and go, ah, 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 and make noises. And I keep telling you, mate, it's not martial arts, okay? Look, it's just saying, hiya!
I learned from the TV show, and I think I'm good at it.
This is like you thinking you can play tennis because you hit the ball and grunt. It's not the same, Dan. It's not the same.
I was very on a separate note. I was very good at Wii U tennis. So, just saying.
Again, not the same.
It's exactly the same.
What show is it? I think it's Gavin and Stacey, where he's like, we're thinking of starting a rock band because of our success on the game Rock Band. But be like a proper rock band, instruments and stuff, or something like that. It's very funny. Anyway, so I'm pretty sure they're probably airing stuff that you could Follow that. Oh, we don't want the potential violent implications. Way more than that scene.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of consistency to it. Like, there's a master list of like edits on the wiki page, like if like stuff that's been censored across Steven Universe. The page is literally just called like censorship in foreign countries, and there's some of them are common themes where there's consistency in most or a lot of countries have like edited them, like the kissing scene in Island Adventure. Because that is a surprisingly... I think you comment on this on the episode. It's a surprisingly graphic kiss between Lars and Sadie.
Lars and Sadie, yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's not like gross graphic. It's just surprising in this show. Like, because it kind of comes out of nowhere. Because that's only like... How many episodes in is that one? It's not far, is it, Island Adventure? It's like 15 episodes in or something. And, like...
Is it that early? Really? Jesus.
Yeah, it's really early Island Adventure, and like and it does sort of
really.
Feel like...
I thought they'd built the Lars and Sadie thing. I thought Island Adventures was the Lars and Sadie thing, sort of coming to a head a bit. Is it only 15 episodes in?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'll double check. I've got it in here in front of me. Let's just see. It is. Oh no, it's all right. It's episode 30. Okay, it's further in than I thought. I thought it was in the first. I thought it was in the pre-Lapis batch, but it's not. It's in the post-Lapis batch.
Slightly in your defence. Obviously, the show aired 2 at a time at that point, so technically.
Oh yeah,
15th area.
Yeah, it's true.
But that could have been where you got that from.
There you go. I just assumed it was. I just thought it was in the pre-Lapis stuff. But my point stands.
I thought we had more Lars and Sadie build up before that one.
Yeah. But like for me, like that I do remember feeling that it was kind of out of left field for how sort of like it was depicted. But like the actual thing it's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with it. They sort of roll over and he sort of like I think there's back rubbing, which I suppose censors would look at and go, that sort of it's not a pack. This is the difference between a kiss and, as the British would say, a snog, I suppose. But some of them are consistent like that. So another one that's really consistent when I looked through the master list was that Meat Beat Mania, which is the name of the rhythm game that Garnet plays in the arcade one. That's obviously Meat Beat Mania has a connotation, so it's often just called Beat Mania in a lot of countries. The meat is removed from Meat Beat Mania.
But what's crazy about that is I don't think it's one of those things where that's just going to sail. That's like saying, oh no, kids shouldn't go to pantomimes because there's loads of innuendos. It's like, yeah, but the kids don't get the innuendos.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing.
Adults
when it's so cleverly done that like they used to do this a lot. Like I remember this a lot on the old like Steven Spielberg cartoons. So like the ones he sort of produced. So like your Animaniacs and your Looney Tunes, your Tiny Toons Adventures. When he went through. There was that era in the 90s of Warner Brothers Animation where it was Animaniacs and Tiny Toon Adventures and all that stuff. They were doing a lot of jokes to keep adults engaged too. And some of them were quite dirty when you actually peeled the layers back, but it didn't matter because they were masked enough. And I'm wondering if those shows also face the same level of censorship in some countries. Because, I mean...
I doubt they did then.
Well, I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me, truthfully, because localization has been a thing for a very long time. Because I mean, when I was a kid, the version of Dragon Ball Z that I got was very different to the real show. I mean, dear Lord, like the real show is horrendous in places for like some sexual content and like so in one of the I swear to God, this is true. In an early episode of Dragon Ball Z, when they summon the dragon. And they're about to get, like, the villains and the heroes are all rushing to get their wish in. Because for those of you who don't know Dragon Ball Z, you collect the Dragon Balls, you get a wish. And some of the premise of the early seasons was about them collecting the Dragon Balls while the bad guys were trying to collect the Dragon Balls. And if the bad guys were probably going to wish to, like, rule the world and, Goku just wanted to, like... Well, Goku was just going through it. But, like, the idea was that it was,
Nerd!
like... What just happened?
I just made the noise nerd again. It was a callback to the
Oh,
the
cool.
Gems
Okay,
discussion.
I just didn't hear it. I just heard loud noises on my end. Just my ear just suddenly hurt. I couldn't work out why. Um, and-
Censorship and making someone repeat something. There's 2 ways to kill a gag.
Yep.
Carry on.
Or explain it. So in Dragon Ball Z there was a bit, and I swear this is in the original version, where what someone yells out to get their wish is that they want a pair of women's underwear, a pair of panties.
Nice.
That didn't get to the UK, I can assure you.
No, I can imagine it didn't. That's quite bizarre. To put it I think there's nothing inherently. It's not swearing. It's not violent.
There's a connotation to that, though, isn't there, about what he wants
Yeah,
women's underwear for?
It's weird as.
Yeah, and like there's other bits where Goku doesn't really understand the difference between men and women when he's younger in the show, and there's a thing that's described in the manga as pat pat, where he basically taps people's crotches to find out if they're boys or girls, which is a funny gag because he's a child at that point. This is before he's an adult. He's like a very young child that's lived on his own for a long time and is a bit disconnected from everything. So the joke is he doesn't really understand the world, and everyone's getting annoyed at him because he's doing gross stuff like that. But obviously, again, didn't make it to the UK. And then, of course, the violence. Like, there's episodes where, like Frieza rammed his horn through Krillin's chest, and there's blood dripping down Frieza's face, and he licks the blood. That's not in the UK version of that show.
Yeah,
so,
and I think... You go on.
And that was in the 90s, is my point. So... I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that shows like Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain and Tiny Toon Adventures were also heavily edited for these sort of innuendo-y jokes, the ones that sort of work on 2 levels for the adults and the children. Like, it'll go straight over the children's head, but the adults would pick up on it.
I think what gets me with censorship, I think a lot of this applies to Steven Universe because of the way a lot of the Ruby, Sapphire, Rose, Pearl content's been censored, is that one, there's a lot of examples where censorship has always been crazy. So there's a very quick Boy Meets World example. There was an episode of Boy Meets World where they discussed sex quite a bit, because it was prom night and they were potentially going to have sex. And then at the end of the episode, they decided they weren't ready, so didn't have sex. That shouldn't have been censored, because actually, that's fundamentally quite a good message to show kids. And especially when children have more access to the internet and pornography and all that sort of stuff, actually, that's the kind of thing that you shouldn't censor. I'd argue it's more dangerous to censor a message of wait until you're ready to have sex than not. But... What annoys me is censorship so we're now at a point where repeats of things like Friends and Only Fools and Horses are being censored in a way they've never been censored before, because times change, as they should, attitudes change, and some jokes that were aired in the 80s and 90s are now not considered appropriate because of the kind of things being joked about, jokes related to race and gender and sexuality. Mm-hmm. So we're now censoring those things more, but what annoys me is it feels like there should be it feels like, okay, well, if we're censoring the stuff that was hideous then more, why are we still censoring the stuff they censored then? I.e., some of the content Ruby Sapphire wise, content about homosexual relationships on Steven Universe and other shows. Why is that still being censored? Because it shouldn't be. There's no reason to censor that stuff. There was no reason to censor it back in the 80s and 90s, but for some reason it was censored.
Yeah, it's a weird double standard, isn't it? Because it's like, on one hand we're going, okay, like, it's not acceptable to sort of poke fun at a minority group now, whether it be race, sexuality, whatever, like, any group, basically. Forget the word minority, just any group. Yet, to me, it's actually just as offensive to those groups to say that somehow the sort of thing that they do is is some way offensive to children or would upset children. Like,
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
A horrendous message to be sending.
It makes no sense.
Especially to God. Imagine, right, Chris? Imagine being like a young child now, or not a young, like a child, but like a young like person now growing up. Someone who's like sort of 12, 13, sort of learning about themselves, maybe realizing they might be gay, and then finding out that their country censors content on television as inappropriate for children when it includes anything to do with the lifestyle they may end up having, may end up being in, and like to be thought, to have to think of yourself as being so offensive to society that they edit anything related to sort of yourself from a television show. Like, how would that make you feel to be sort of seen as too vulgar to be on television for children? Like, it's nuts. It's insane.
The idea of censoring the stuff that pokes fun at that sort of stuff, but still also censoring the stuff that celebrates it, bamboozles me. Like, because one is progress and the other one is completely contradictory to that progress.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because it's what they're censoring. Notice that they're not doing that to other shows. They're not doing that to shows aimed at adults. This is purely this phenomenon of editing out material relating to sort of sexuality is 100% children's shows.
Yeah, and things like sexuality, things like whether you should be ready to drink, like the example of someone stabbing someone and licking their blood in Dragon Ball Z, I'm with that. Fine, that makes sense to censor that.
Yeah, that got in Japan because Japan is a strange country. The notion that makes some pretty out there TV shows.
Yeah. The notion of Steven Universe being censored for showing us that anyone can love anyone. The notion of Boy Meets World being censored for showing us to wait until you're ready to have sex. That sort of censorship blows my mind.
It's kind of, you know what it is?
I don't understand why that exists.
It's tone deaf censorship, isn't it? It's just tone deaf. Yeah, it's just the only people who are willing to do that as a job, censorship, are like bored house mums, the housewives or mums or whatever, and presumably, I'm assuming, but just parents in general, who are just sat around going, "Oh, I would want my kid to see that." I'm making arbitrary decisions,
I don't know, but it might not even be that though, man. It might be literally the equivalent of getting the episode Control F kiss, Control F sex. Oh, they mentioned sex. Okay, well, get rid of it just in case. Instead of taking the fucking time to go, okay, well, what's the message? What's the points? What's the context? Like, so much now in terms of censorship around television, stand-up comedy especially. For some reason, music seems to kind of be... Although, no, I don't. Music isn't these days censored. You only got to look at recent controversies of certain artists with their lyrics. Everything now is being so censored that we're not ever looking at the context. Obviously, a lot of those contexts are horrible, but in some cases, actually, if the context was looked at, like, imagine if Hannah Gatsby's Nanette got censored and cut down. Like, but even though the context of all that stuff being talked about makes it vital watching for everyone in terms of what they could learn. Again, I know we're talking. We keep veering away from Steven Universe.
There is a wider discussion. But again, I'm noticing a theme of it's children, because you're not going to get Hannah Gatsby's Nanette censored because it's a stand-up show and those are generally aimed at adults. There's not much danger of that, but like music, if a song is in the charts, it's all over the radio, it's being used in adverts, it's playing on the sound systems of shops you go in. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, it's stuff that children are getting regular and easy access to that seem to be the focus of this. And I am all for, like, there are definitely things that are inappropriate to show to children. I 100% accept that it's probably not acceptable to show a child a villain stabbing another person in the chest and then licking the blood. I totally understand that position. But what I think is nuts is, like, how inconsistent and arbitrary the rules and where that line is. And what you're essentially doing is with censorship is you're giving countries the power to sort of to micromanage that sort of control. And I think that's what's strange is that like the tiny moments they're choosing to cut that can have a huge impact on the quality of the product for essentially no real reason other than someone thought, oh, somebody might find that to be... Do you know what I mean? Like, the reasons are all so vague and so sort of arbitrary that, and it's often at the cost of the context of everything. So, yeah, you can talk about the big sort of sweeping edits, like the Boy Meets World one, which is obviously a big, huge edit to an episode that really destroys the point. But sometimes they make little edits that really fuck with the flow as well. And it just, I just think there's no consistent system for it. And I think that...
Sorry, go on, let you finish.
I think that's... I mean, I guess that's the same problem we have just globally with other stuff. Like, I guess every country has its own laws and has its own taste and has its own boundaries. But I think that... I just feel bad for people who live in countries like Brazil and the Philippines and that aren't getting Steven Universe or Adventure Time or any of these great shows in their original form because basically their particular country has chosen to be pickier, you know, like some of the edits are nuts, like really are nuts. I don't, like I said, you know what's funny is I don't actually mind the Meat Beat Mania thing. Fine, like it doesn't affect the episode. They're losing a gag, which is a shame. But how does that, you know, does that legitimately change the show? No, there's one gag less. Okay, that's unfortunate, but, you know, not the end of the world. But some of this stuff really does completely change the intent of the show, the context of the show.
So list a few in a sec, but just on the wider point, I'd just like to add that the other crazy thing to me is if you block the stuff that in context is a good message, what you're doing is not exposing children to that before, I'm sorry, they're already going to be exposed to things like violence and sex. Because I remember when I was younger, my dad did something genius. My dad says to me, he's talking one day about the computer, and I think I make some joke about looking up like inappropriate, like porn or something, like not inappropriate porn, sorry, like inappropriate content such as porn or something. I make some joke, and I was genuinely joking. And my dad looks at me and he goes, yeah, but you've got no idea of the kind of parental controls I've got on that computer. And he goes, you've got no idea how much I'm actually seeing of what you're doing on there. And I'm like, oh shit. And it just made me never look at anything bad on that computer because I was like, well, dad's tracking me with ways I don't understand. Now, looking back, if I'd have really thought about it, I'd have realised that was bollocks because he's not tech savvy. But I didn't, partly because of how new things like that technology was and the fact that he was an older figure, blah, 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 blah. Now, my kids are going to be taught with iPads. And if I turn to my kids and go, yeah, well, you've got no idea what kind of parental locks I've got, the kid would be like, yeah, no, you're talking bollocks there, Dad. Like, I know full well I'm more tech savvy than you. There are going to be ways in the future for them to unlock phones. There you go, that case in point for one. The computer that I'm referring to in the story of my childhood was in a communal office space, whereas my kids are probably going to have a phone which can connect to the internet. Like, it's a completely different scenario. And kids are going to be able to access that sort of shit. So if that's going to happen anyway, isn't it vital that at a young age where parents can control that shit, you get messages of love and peace
But this is what I'm saying about, like I think it's really important that countries look at who's making these decisions, because it does feel to me, it's like the same issue they have in the States with their rating board, you know, and it's built up of parents mostly, who are like ultra conservative and like there's a movie. What was that movie called that was all about the rating board in the US? There was a whole documentary made on them.
I can't remember.
Oh, it was really good. This film is not yet rated. It's called. It's a great film.
Right.
Really points out a lot of the issues we're talking about here much clearer and much better. Which is that giving a small select group of people this power is strange and can really be problematic. And particularly in the sort of more tone-deaf examples, like you've just pointed out. Like that Boy Meets World one just breaks my brain slightly, because I just think, like, you're absolutely right. It's a positive message. There's literally no reason to do it. And I think here, Steven Universe is the exact same issue. The ultimate message of Steven Universe is so positive. The idea that anyone would feel appropriate to fuck with that. Basically, they're not watching the show properly. They're not. So
give us.
You're right. What they're doing is they're looking at moments in isolation. They're going. They're not Control F like kiss as such, but they are basically just looking at specific. They're not watching the whole show because they don't have the time or whatever, and they're just finding direct moments and looking at it in its outside of its context and making a call, and that is nuts. And that's where the problem lies, because I think.
So give us some. Sorry, go on.
No, go on.
No. Finish your point and then give us some examples. Read from the list. Give us some examples for people that aren't aware of what's been cut where.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I can't remember what the point was now. Because I got interrupted twice.
Sorry. I thought you'd wrapped up. I very much thought you were done then the second time.
Well, I picked out just a couple that I found like funny or interesting that they cut. They're not all to make a wider point here of some of the cuts, but joking victim. When Sadie says, "Let me be his player too." We spent the whole night together. He let me be his player too. We spent the whole night together. That is cut in a lot of countries, particularly I noticed in Australia and New Zealand. I guess they don't like the idea that they were spending the night together. Although it was very clear they were playing video games, and I can't imagine anyone being upset by that. Sometimes as well, I think a lot of these cuts are made out of like fear of backlash rather than actual caring. Like they're just like, I don't want to deal with the emails. Delete it.
Yep. And a lot of the cuts a lot of the cuts are viewed from the eyes of an adult, not a child, because that won't mean anything.
And I think as well, some of these cuts are obviously very political. Like, you've got countries like Russia where their government have taken a very specific stance on homosexuality. Therefore, some of the cuts are just politically driven, and that's also nuts. But there's nothing we can do about that. I just hope the people in countries like that ultimately get a better government. So many birthdays. This is my favourite one. Can I just say, of all the cuts, it's not the cut itself is my favourite one, but this is like the best thing to be cut. It's so funny that they thought to cut this. Steve, I think I'm just laughing at the line. I forgot this line existed. Steven says, "But a boy on the cusp of manhood can't spend the whole day whackering." I don't even remember the context, but that's brilliant.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. I think I've got the in fact, I can actually play you this line. I brought it up to watch the clip. Wait, here we.
That was fun, but a boy on the cusp of manhood can't spend the whole day whackering. That is my favorite.
That's brilliant.
So good. So that's been cut in several countries. Another one that's like, I get it, but like, again, kids would not really pick up on it. But this one is slightly more overt, so I get it. But another one I highlighted was, Maximum Capacity, the episode where they're going through Greg's basement. That book that Stephen finds, and he's like, you can look at this when you're older.
Oh, yeah. I think we talked about that at the time. Yeah.
We did. That gets cut in a lot of countries.
I get that one.
Yeah, that one's slightly more overt, I think. That's a little...
But yeah, because whackering, you sort of have to, with an adult frame of mind, put the connotations together. Same for the, we've been up all night, he let me be my player too. When he snatches the book and says, you've got to look at that when you're older, the connotation's a bit more on... I can't imagine a child turning to an adult and going, what's whackering? Because they get the context it's meant in the show. But I can certainly imagine a child turning to an adult and going, why can't he look at that book till he's older?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that one makes more sense to me. An interesting one that was a really common one, Chris, really common across Europe and Asia, and this one baffled me. And I pulled this one out because it's one of your favourite gags.
Right.
That you specifically referenced when we talked about it. When Steven comes in and says he's got an announcement, and Ronaldo goes, "You're pregnant?"
Yeah. Love that gag.
And then later on, they find out Steven lied about the lion, and then Ronaldo goes, "Bet you're not even pregnant."
That's been cut, has it?
Yeah. Both.
Well,
Both
because
references.
in case people don't want people to think about pregnancy and how babies are made.
Or
Crazy.
I honestly, I think it's the male being pregnant is what's been deemed offensive there. The idea of a man being pregnant has somehow been deemed weird or offensive or strange or something. I don't know. It's in a lot. I know it was honestly when I hit the page and I found that the first time. I think the first time I saw it was that it was in like Central and Eastern Europe, which like I was like, okay, fair enough, like one area, and then I like saw it in 2 other areas and was like, what the fuck? So I like Control F Ronaldo and like pregnant, and like it's like a huge number of countries have censored that line, which is nuts.
That's
right?
ridiculous.
And here's an interesting one that changes the whole connotation of Pearl's song, in my opinion. So in Swan to the Sword, Pearl's in Do It For Her, Pearl sings, "When you live for someone, you're prepared to die," because it's the idea is that like the lesson there is like that Pearl, like in that episode, Pearl learns that maybe she was maybe almost too dedicated to Rose, and that like she has to think of herself. She's her own person. She shouldn't just exist for someone else. There's a whole undertone about that in that episode. In Latin America, like Brazil, places like that, it was changed to, "If love makes you move, you won't fear anything."
It's just a very watered down version of the original line, isn't it?
I mean, but it's not. To me, it's completely changes it. She's, it's not about being so dedicated that she's prepared to die. It's just saying, oh, the love for that person will keep you brave, which isn't the same. it's
No,
watered
yeah,
down,
sorry,
cover
yeah,
it.
I was thinking more of like what I think. I don't know. It's another one where I don't agree with it, but I understand why that's been cut. But again, it's a song. No child's gonna go death, suicide, huh? Like,
yeah, and there's an interesting thing brought up to me in the Discord when someone said that, like, I think it's somebody who lived in the Philippines, which is that their episodes get double censored because they're in a wider region that when it reaches that region, it gets censored, and then there's the individual affiliate stations that then air it in specific countries in that region, and then they get a crack at censoring it too. Which means that in some countries the episodes are double censored, like in the Philippines was the example in question. That's insane to me.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Obviously, like a lot of we know a lot of the big ones. So the one that most offended us, I think, when we talked about it originally was because it's just fucking ridiculous. Was like Rose and Pearl embracing in.
Yep.
I forgot the name of the episode off the top of my head. That's gonna bother me. Do you remember what that episode was called, Chris?
No. The one where they fused and showed Greg the fusion. Yeah, I can't remember what it was called.
Oh, it's just. Oh, we need to talk. It's called. Yeah. There you go.
Right.
A weird one I've noticed is several countries just skip episodes, like altogether. Like the cuts they felt they need to make would be so egregious that there'd be nothing left, like 3 minutes worth of an 11-minute show. It's like, what's the point? So they've cut the whole episode just because there's no way to get around it. But some of the choices of episodes that are being cut regularly are really strange. I noticed Jungle Moon is skipped in multiple countries.
God, that's going to be very confusing for people. It's the second part of a two-parter, in some ways. That concludes a cliffhanger from the episode before.
Mm-hmm. Last one out of Beach City is regularly skipped, which is Mystery Girl.
Is Jungle Moon skipped because it's Steve Oni the whole episode?
What, Jungle Moon?
Yeah.
I don't know. It literally all it says is this episode was skipped to this country for unknown reasons. Really don't know. I don't know what was offensive about
just
that
if those because I think you've said before countries have cut Steve Oni, so if that's a whole. If they're countries that have in general made edits to Steve Oni episodes, maybe that's why. Yeah, because they spend the whole night together as one person. I don't know.
There's one country that cut the episode, just cut moments from it. Let me see which country this was, and I'll see what the edits actually are. So in Southeast Asia, they instead of cutting the whole episode, they made some adjustments. So let's see what the adjustments were. Oh, they cut Stavoni punching the glass and revealing Pink for the first time. They cut Stavoni shaving their beard. Okay. Stavoni slicing an alien in half was cut. And Stavoni holding up an impaled half of an alien was cut.
The alien ones I kind of get, but they're flipping dads shaving all the time.
That's what I meant to say earlier as well. Like, I find the double standard to be the most offensive thing about all of this. Is like the idea that like, oh, a straight relationship is not as censorable as a gay one. Like that's nuts. Like, I just think, okay, if it had been if Rose and Pearl had been. If they're aliens, so they're not really female male, they present that way. But like, let's say Rose and Pearl, one of those two characters presented male, right? There's no way the UK would have censored their embracing in We Need to Talk.
No.
That's the thing that bothers me the most. It's either all or none. Like, if you think that's inappropriate for children to show characters embracing, kissing, whatever, like, fine. You're an idiot, in my opinion, but fine. Cut it, but cut it for everyone. Like, let's blanket cut that then. Let's not like have this weird double standard where we're targeting a certain kind of relationship. That's what bothers me. That's what offends me. Like, and the amount of petitions I've signed, the amount of complaints I've sent to Cartoon Network about that, and it is like, and me and many people, and no one is doing anything about it, and it still airs that way, to my understanding.
Yeah, so it's absolutely horrific, and it's like I say, it doesn't. It's the point I was making earlier. It just doesn't make the censorship itself has no consistency and doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So there you go. A very angry SU.
Yeah, well, just fucking fuck these people. Like, I really, like I said, censorship has been a thing since I was a child. To wrap up my overall point, which is that censorship has been a thing since I was a child. It's always going to be an issue. It's always going to be a thing where people are sort of policing what kids see. And I understand the attempt, I understand the effort, and I think there are certain occasions in which that is appropriate, and I think that is fine. And there are even occasions where I don't personally agree with the cut, but I get it. The issues, in my opinion, come from when you cut something to the point where it no longer makes sense for arbitrary reasons, or when your cutting has a double standard to it, which I've just mentioned. And I think that this is what we need to be stamping out, is like that sort of double standard. And also, maybe they bought the rights to the show before they knew what it was, but I think the other issue here is as well, if a show is going to require this much editing, maybe don't air it in your country. If you sit down and look at Steven Universe and you go, it's too gay, just too much gay, just don't put the show on air. Like, don't torture people this way with these, because I really feel sad, because we are the sort of nerds, or I am particularly the nerd apparently this episode, that will seek this out. And if we stumbled across this on TV in the UK, we would probably then look it up and we would know what was going on and we would understand it was being cut and dig out the original versions, right? But think of the casual viewers, the people who do just watch it on telly in the UK, the Cartoon Network people. They don't know it's been cut. They just think that's the show. And, like, that's a real bummer. That really bums me out. Particularly in the countries that are really have egregious ones. Like I said, like in the UK or countries like Russia. And it's nuts that I would never have assumed I was in a country that would censor stuff in that way.
No.
It upsets me to think that I live in a country that is that is making the sort of cuts you'd imagine countries like Russia making.
And I think my big concluding thing would be, again, what really angers me is when it feels. Sorry, I think just a shitload of plates or something just got dropped. One sec. Are you all right? Are you alright? Yeah, I think so. Okay, I'll be down in a sec.
So what's going on, Chris?
I would, Well, I can't tell you, Dan, because I don't want to encourage our listeners to have shelves where they can fall down and glass. No, I think basically one of the cupboards with all the glasses in, I think Jess just opened the cupboard and like shitloads of glasses fell out. So we're wrapping up, so I will go and see if she's all right in a sec.
To be fair, just to clarify, I could hear what was happening. Chris asked twice if Jess was all right. So she's replied yes twice. So Chris isn't going, I'm sure she's okay. We can spend the next 2 minutes wrapping this up before I go check.
Yeah. And if we were halfway
Chris
through,
did
I'd
verify she was fine.
Yeah. Which I did close to the mic, so people might have heard. But also, it would be very even her saying, "Yeah, I'm fine." If we were only 10 minutes in, I'd still go down. But considering this is the last point, we're good, and I'll give you an update at the beginning of the next episode. For me, it's context. It's when they cut something that actually the context of that thing is a good message and positive for children. That's when it makes me really angry.
Yeah, I think that sort of wraps it up. I think this is a topic we may end up broaching again as more edits happen. I'm really going to be interested to see what happens when some of these countries start airing the wedding and things like that. So this is a topic that may come back up in a sort of like condensed form, like be a mini news story within a wider hiatus episode. This week we chose to focus on that because we had nothing else. Next week we're probably going to look at maybe the very first episode again. Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the pilot's the logical one to rewatch. So yeah, join us next week for us rewatching the pilot.
Yeah, unless some major news occurs, in which case we'll obviously
or the final episode drops.
Yeah, of course. Then that changes the game. But the assumption is, as is, that's our plan. One last quick thing to quickly plug before we go: we do have a Discord. It's gotten very active, which I love, and everyone in there. They're my special favourites. I mean, we love all our listeners, but if you're in the Discord, you're a special favourite.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, they're great bunch. So if you want to get in on the conversation, Chris and I dip in and out of there regularly. Less so recently because we've both been really busy. But yeah, we were I was in there yesterday chatting to them about censorship in sort of build up to this episode, which is where I learnt about that double censorship thing that I was talking about earlier, where like some countries they're in a region and they get double censored. So yeah, join. The link is in the description of this episode. That'll take you. It's like the invite link. It's like a permanent invite link. It's functional like all the time. So you can just click on that, and then if you don't already have a Discord account, you can sign in. You can sign up, or if you have a Discord account, just sort of add our server to your account, and then you can join in with the chat when you feel like it. Yeah. So feel free to jump in at the bottom. In the description.
Cool.
And also, all the usual subscribe, review, like all the usual things we'd like you to do. That would be great.
Yeah, if you could do them all, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, there you go. So that has been everything for this week. Thanks very much for listening. You are all the best. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
We'll speak to you next week as we discuss... what was... Oh, Jesus. You know what, Chris? I've just realised. I don't remember... What is the first episode actually called? It's called Gem Glow, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's Gem Glow.
Gem Glow, yeah.
So we'll be back next week when we hopefully revisit Gem Glow. Actually, not hopefully. I hope we don't do that, because if we don't do that, that means an episode is probably dropped. So let me start again. And we'll speak to you next week when we, regrettably, are forced to revisit Gem Glow.
No, you should have done this. We'll see you next week where, if need be, we'll rewatch Gem Glow.
There you go. Nailed it. First try.